Hey guys, today I want to talk about a seemingly simple concept that's actually really deep once you get into it, and that is mono versus stereo. Now, most people are probably already familiar with the terms, maybe you've worked with mono and stereo audio before, but most people aren't working with these things the way they should be. So it's a deep dive, I want to get into it, let's just dive right in. Before we get started, if you enjoy these videos, you want to support my channel, head over to alexknickerbocker.com. I've got a PayPal donation link as well as a bunch of royalty-free sound effects that I'm curating from my personal library for your royalty-free use. You'll find everything from transitions and stingers to vehicles to ambiances, and I'll be adding more as I can, so don't forget to check back. All right, to start with, you need to know the terms. Mono is short for monophonic, which just means single channel. So in the speaker world, it means you just have one single speaker. All of your sound is going to be coming from that one speaker, and it's just a single point source of sound. When you're talking about audio files, it just means that your file has a single channel of sound. There's no left and right information. You can't hear things going back and forth. It's just a single point source. Stereo, of course, means two channels, which in hardware world means you've got usually a left and a right speaker, although it can also mean you've just got two speakers in general. It doesn't have to be left and right. It can be front and back or really any other configuration. With audio files, it's the same. You usually have a left and a right channel, but just because a file has two channels doesn't mean it has to be a stereo file. It can have a mid and a side channel. So you've got all your center information in your mid channel, and you've got all of the side information, both left and right, in the side channel. That's a different way of recording a stereo image. So it can be really interesting once you start getting into that. It's also important to note that you're not limited to just one or two channels, either with speakers or audio files. Dolby Atmos, for example, supports up to 64 different speakers that you can place and individually control sounds to. And a lot of the time on bigger field recordings, I've got up to 12 channel audio files. It's not necessarily just mono or stereo or left and right. But most of the time when you're working with sound, you're either going to be cutting with mono or stereo files because they offer you a little bit more control over your sound, and they're also easier to work with in general. So let's take a look at some mono sound. The best way to use mono is when you've got a single point source of sound on screen. A lot of Foley is recorded in mono, so any doorknobs or hand motions or cloth movement, things that can be localized to a single point on a screen rather than being kind of all around you. Also, anything that's going to be moving back and forth in a stereo image from left to right, I'll generally cut using mono sounds because I have one single control that I can pan back and forth rather than having to manage two different controls, two different channels of the same sound, and having to work with both of those at the same time, panning them in the image. For example, using a mono whoosh, just a single channel file, I can pan from left to right and it'll sound organic. I have a lot of control over where that one sound is happening. Whereas if I have a two channel whoosh, I really don't have the same level of control. I'm kind of married to how it transitions, where it transitions, and it can be a little more limiting if I'm trying to match exactly what's on screen to make it feel organic. But there are a lot of sounds that I do want to use stereo for. If I'm cutting backgrounds, for example, and I want to create a nice kind of lush ambient bed of sounds for all the rest of my audio to live within, I can use a mono sound, but it's not really going to be very immersive. I'll layer in a mono background here, and you can tell all of the same information is coming out of both left and right speakers, and it's fine. You don't have the same depth that you might with stereo, but it gets the point across. However, if I spread the stereo image out and I'm able to get left and right information, it's a much more nuanced and interesting sound than if it was just a mono file. So you get a little bit more character out of it, and it's just a better experience overall. Another thing with stereo files, a lot of people tend to hard pan them. So you've got your left all the way left and your right all the way right, and it becomes this really wide image that you don't necessarily need, and it's not necessarily going to sound right. Especially with backgrounds, you can hear this hard panned left and right, and it's fine, but if I narrow that image just a little bit and I pan things slightly off the edges, it's going to seem a little bit more natural and more centered in the atmosphere. And again, that's just working with mono or stereo files in a mono or stereo speaker system. As soon as you have a surround sound system like a 5.1 or a 7.1 speaker system, you've got this entire field that you can pan all these sounds within. You can put things slightly forward or slightly behind the listener. You can do things on left and right, but around the entire space. It's a lot more flexibility, and it's a lot more of an interesting and deep sound field than just a simple single speaker or dual speaker setup. So again, seemingly simple concept on the surface, but once you understand the depths of mono versus stereo versus multi-channel systems, you can get a lot more out of your audio. One other thing specifically for people working with video, most video editing programs now have audio tracks that will adapt to whatever type of file you throw onto them. I wouldn't recommend using them because they actually take away a little bit of the control as well as the thought process about how to work with multi-channel sound. So maybe they fit within your workflow, they're super easy to use, they'll adapt to whatever sound you throw on them, but if you want that control and you want to be able to think about sound in that way, maybe stay away from those and use dedicated mono or stereo tracks. It'll give you a little bit more of that thought process and you'll be able to stay a little bit more organized, know all of your sounds, where they are, what they're doing, etc. So hopefully that was helpful. I know some of these concepts are a little bit abstract, but by understanding this stuff, you'll be able to get that much more out of your audio. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe. I'm over on Instagram at AXK, so come follow me over there. And as always, thanks for watching.